Hello and welcome to Tawana's Talks. I hope that the information here helps someone. Again, I record these videos just as a way of self help journaling um, with the premise that if it can help someone, then I'm happy, and sometimes that someone is me. So I believe that I am a teacher by design, meaning that I feel like I'm one of the few people that have found my calling. What God has placed me in this world to be is a teacher. I absolutely love it. It is what brings me joy in every capacity, and so I've taught in the classroom and have moved through the capacity of education and had the ability to teach a content to students, information to students, to people, to adults, as well as just skills and just life. And so I consider this teaching as well. And so it's who I am. But I look at teaching or being a teacher not just a noun, it's also a verb. And so it is something that a teacher does, and it is who a teacher is. And so I was having a conversation with a colleague, another educator, whose passion and desire through the conversation was understood to be something that focuses on the mental and social emotional well-being and developing a culture for students that is conducive to their learning, but identifying or developing a culture or an environment that provides protection and comfort for their social emotional well-being, and was contrasting it to maybe others who was focusing on the academics. And in that moment, I was like, well, in order to teach them, you have to treat them. And so you can't teach a person if you don't treat the person. And that comes from building relationships. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so when we're approaching education in every aspect, whether it's on a job, whether it's teaching children in a classroom or teaching children at an activity or what may have you, you have to treat them. You have to be in touch with the social emotional well-being. Now, we're not all counselors, so I'm not talking about providing a counseling session, but a listening session. And not just listening with your ears, but listening with your eyes, recognizing, realizing what the need is, what's the gap that needs to be filled to be able to reach your goal and your purpose, which is the teaching and the learning. And with that aspect, with teaching has to come learning. And so because teaching is a verb, that means there should be some results from it. If I was learning to run, then the result should be after I'm taught, I should know how to run. If I don't know how to run after being taught, then I was not taught how to run. The person may have presented well, the person may have had information well, and people sometimes have a hard time hearing that, especially teachers. Like, if the goal was not reached at the level of capacity or the level of effectiveness for what you were teaching, and again, that's in anything, then teaching did not happen. That is not to take away from the person who was the presenter or the teacher, but it is an opportunity to be able to look and say, all right, where was the mark missed? What was the gap in that situation whereby the information did not cross over? And that gap could be in the treating process. Was there treatment before teaching? Did I identify the real situation that created a block or created a hindrance from learning? And if that be the case, then how do I approach the situation whereby teaching can be more effective? And so you look at things like, and then this is just another example that I used before that just comes to mind, and this wasn't even supposed to be a teaching podcast, but this is just something that is just really just been on my mind. So for instance, if you are a teacher and if you can identify with this as a teacher, then great. And maybe another example will come to mind during this. But let's say you're given homework. You have a class full of 25 kids and you're given homework, and 20 of those kids don't do the homework. Well, first step back and look at your goal. What is the goal of the homework? The goal of the assessment is to see what the child has learned, or the student in that matter has learned from the teaching practice. Homework should be able to give you some qualitative or quantitative data of what the student has learned. But if they're not doing it, then you don't have that data to be able to assess what they have learned, or the capacity of what they have understood through the teaching. And continuously this happens, then you don't give zeros for the homework, because a zero then represents that they didn't learn anything, and you have no idea if they learned anything because they did not complete the assignment to show you if they learned anything. So the gap then is they're not doing homework. Why? Let's look at the reason why. When you treat the situation, then that could come to be, you have a whole host of reasons why the homework was not done in that at that level. It could be, you have students, and again, this is any age, so it could be students are taking care of siblings, students have home life situations, students have jobs, students don't understand, and so they feel inferior to do the assignment. And so when you stop and you think, okay, why aren't we doing the homework? Then maybe that's not the approach that needs to be taken to be able to assess their knowledge of understanding of the content that's being taught. So then you take another approach. You say, okay, well, we're going to do it here so that I can be able to assess. There's going to be independent time that happens here. So you have to provide the environment that is conducive to what you're teaching, that is conducive to learning for that particular student, or those particular students, or those particular individuals that you are teaching. The environment needs to conform to the learner or the student, not the student conform to the environment. That's not what teaching is. That's not the way it should work. So for instance, if you are a swim teacher, again, your assessment should be, how well does the student swim after I've taught them? If they couldn't swim at all, and then you do an assessment and they still can't swim, then you did not teach them to swim. And was the environment conducive for them to learn how to swim? So for instance, you can't sit in a classroom and say, you need to do your arms like this when you're in the water, you need to hold your breath like this when you're in the water, you need to do like this for a breaststroke. When you get in, hold your breath right now for 10 seconds. The water's going to be wet. Let me splash a little bit on your arm and see what that feels like. And then throw them in the pool and say, they didn't swim. They're not a good learner because they didn't swim. They failed the assessment. The environment was not conducive to them learning how to swim. You had them in an environment that was not mimicking of the environment that they're needing to be successful in, and then throwing them into that environment after the fact, and then assessing them and judging their ability based on their lack of understanding because teaching didn't happen. And so being able to teach, if you will, or teaching happens when you're able to treat the person. And that treatment comes from relationships, listening with both your ears and your eyes, and then setting up an environment that is conducive for their success. Teaching is so far removed from the olden days. And man, I say olden days, and I'm talking about when I was in the classroom. So clearly scratch that from the record, not olden days. But I just remember situations and when I was in the classroom where you in the class, the teacher's teaching something, and then there's assessment and you don't fare very well, whether that's a C or below or whatever that not faring very well is for you. And then you just get a message from the teacher, try harder, study harder. And like, what does that look like? Teaching has come such a long way and should be viewed as a proactive method, whereby if you came to me in whatever capacity you've come to me, whether it's a grade level, a content information, whether that's in school, whether that's on a job, whether that's training, whatever the case may be, you are there, the student is there with the lack of, the ignorance of, the absence of the knowledge that you're going to teach them. Therefore, with having that lack of that knowledge, that's the gap. That gap has to be closed, because by the time that gap has to be closed with the fact that by the time they leave that training situation, that learning situation, that classroom situation, there should be an understanding and an application of that knowledge based on what was taught to them. We can't expect that they came in to the situation with the knowledge. If we didn't teach it, we can't assess it. So they didn't come in with the knowledge, and therefore once we assess them, it's like, you failed that. Well, wait a minute. Let's look at the teaching practices. Let's look at the environment that the teaching was set up in, and let's be more proactive and being able to identify and triaging the real reasons why learning is not taking place, or why you're unable to assess the learning that based on what was taught, and why the student has not grasped the information that was being taught. Once you're able to uncover those layers and treat that, then you can have a true understanding of what it is that that student has learned, what it is that that student knows, and then go from there to teach the next level. So again, we can't teach them unless we treat them. And that's in every level, in every aspect of life: the classroom, the workplace, your home life, your children, people that you come in contact with, relationships, learning other people. You can't teach them unless you treat them. I hope that this was helpful.